Hello, Oklahoma. My name is Congresswoman Kendra Horn, and I represent Oklahoma's 5th Congressional District. Thank you for joining me today for a State of the District update. This is a special chance for me to talk directly with folks back home about the landscape in Oklahoma's 5th District, the challenges we face, and our work to make progress for Oklahoma's families over the next year. During my first year in Congress, I heard from thousands of Oklahomans at town halls and constituent coffees, in classrooms and community centers, from Oklahoma City to Kanawha. I heard from teachers who struggle to make ends meet. I heard from parents who can't afford their child's medication. And I heard from voters across the political spectrum worried about their future, uncertain about the direction our country is headed in. I don't believe the direction of Oklahoma's 5th District has ever been certain. As a fifth-generation Oklahoman, my great-grandparents and grandparents weathered the uncertainty of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, not knowing what the future of our state held. There was uncertainty and pain decades later when Clara Luper and her students sat down at Katz Drug Store in Oklahoma City for one of our nation's first sit-ins. As Clara Luper said, her fight for civil rights was like believing in the sun when the sun didn't shine. I hear a similar uncertainty today when I talk with Oklahomans about the future of our state. As a freshman legislator last year, I was among the first congressional class ever to come into Congress during a government shutdown. When I was sworn in, our federal government couldn't work together enough to keep the doors open. At town halls, I've heard from Oklahomans who ask me whether it's even worth trying to bring both parties together anymore, or whether it's worth trying to enact legislation in a gridlock Congress. My answer is yes. I ran for Congress to challenge the idea that both parties can't work together. And today, 1 year after my swearing in, I'm proud to say that we have made some real progress uniting Republicans and Democrats to pass meaningful reforms. Our fight to end partisan gridlock isn't over, but we've shown that Congress still has the power to address the issues that matter most to the American people. The victories that we've won show that we have more in common than divides us. Just yesterday, the bipartisan USMCA trade deal was signed into law. For months, Republicans and Democrats in the House debated labor protections, drug pricing reforms, and enforcement provisions in the USMCA. I worked with Republicans and Democrats for months, urging our leadership to finalize the deal and bring it to the floor. In the end, after many hours of debate and thoughtful dialogue, we enacted a trade deal that is good for our country and for Oklahoma. This is just one example of what we can accomplish when we reach across the aisle and we put solutions over partisanship. Last year, we passed legislation fully funding the government, enacting a set of appropriations bills that invest in our top national priorities from early education to national security. The year-end funding bills that we passed in December increased funding for Head Start and Early Head Start by over $500 million, and the National Defense Authorization Act we passed provided a historic 3.1% pay raise for service members, the largest raise in a decade. Those aren't Democrat or Republican priorities. Those are victories for all of Oklahoma. They're the result of working together with members of Congress, regardless of their party. In the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, where I serve as the chair of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee, I just introduced bipartisan legislation setting out a long-term sustainable framework for NASA and our nation's civil space program. Our bipartisan bill takes a comprehensive approach to supporting NASA's work as a multi-mission agency, emphasizing the importance of balanced exploration, science, aeronautics, technology, and education portfolios. What makes this legislation possible was an across-the-aisle teamwork, including over a year of hearings, expert testimony, and thoughtful debate. When I introduced this bill, our fellow Oklahoman and ranking member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee Congressman Frank Lucas was a co-sponsor. What I've seen from my seat as chair of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee is that when we put our heads together, Republicans and Democrats, we can achieve goals from the moon to Mars and beyond. One of the most significant bipartisan achievements that we had last year was our Tenants' Bill of Rights for military families. I worked on this with Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe. At one of my first town halls, a mother told me her story about the unsafe and unsanitary housing conditions her family was forced to live in at Tinker. And since hearing her story, I used my position on the House Armed Services Committee to fight for the protections for our military families across this country. The Tenants' Bill of Rights that we passed and was enacted protects our military families from predatory contracts and provides increased oversight of privatized base housing. Our fight for military families and safe housing is far from over, but the Tenants' Bill of Rights that Senator Inhofe and I worked to pass is an important step in the right direction. So while Oklahoma still faces its share of challenges, while we have work to do here in Congress to end partisan gridlock, the state of Oklahoma's 5th District is hopeful. Hopeful that we can work together. Hopeful that we can pass bipartisan solutions to address the issues Oklahomans care most about. And hopeful that we won't let partisanship define who we are. In 2020, I am fighting to keep that hope alive by seeking bipartisan action on issues like prescription drug prices. Last year, the House passed the bipartisan bill called the Lower Drug Costs Now Act, legislation that would drastically lower drug prices for the diseases from diabetes to cancer. The bill included a provision which would lower prescription drug costs for the 46 million patients who have Medicare Part D by reducing the program's out-of-pocket maximum from $5,100 to $2,000. My provision would save up to $3,100 annually for patients with Medicare Part D. Now, we need the Senate to consider this legislation. This year, I will continue my focus on serving Oklahomans. Over the last year, our district offices resolved 371 constituent cases, returning over $500,000 to the people of Oklahoma's 5th District. My office responded to over 26,500 letters, emails, and calls from Oklahomans writing to us about the issues important to them and our state. We are here to serve, and if you or your family needs assistance in the new year, I encourage you to reach out to our office. In 2020, I will continue my fight to address the student debt crisis. In the U.S. today, there are 43 million Americans who hold student loan debt totaling over $1.6 trillion. We must use practical solutions to address the student loan crisis, solutions that are fair to both students and taxpayers. We need fixes that are fair to people who hold student debt and those who've paid it off. Last year, I introduced a slate of legislation to address the student debt crisis, including a bill to stop federally issued loans from accruing interest while students are in school, and another bill to stop loan providers from charging students arbitrarily high interest rates. Nothing we do in government should be arbitrary. We need an intentional, thoughtful process about how we treat everyone, especially those seeking opportunity in this country. I'm proud that both of these pieces of legislation are bipartisan. The problem of student debt, like most challenges our country faces, is not a partisan one. Our solutions to address the problem shouldn't be partisan either. Student loan debt and prescription drug prices are just two of the issues that I plan to tackle in 2020. In Congress, I will continue fighting for action to invest in infrastructure, legislation to take care of our veterans, and bipartisan solutions to increase access and affordability in healthcare. The key to our success on these issues is to stay focused on solutions over politics. And always remember the golden rule, to treat others the way that you'd want to be treated. My parents taught me in action as well as word that we should not just have the golden rule hanging on our walls, but it should hang heavy in our hearts. In Congress and at home, that means treating people with the respect they deserve and looking for common ground that brings us together. Bipartisan solutions won't always come easy. Democracy in a nation as large and diverse as ours can be messy. But Oklahoma's civil rights leader, Clara Luper, once said, "The beauty of America is in the diversity of her people." I'm glad we live in a congressional district in a country that is home to a multitude of voices and a diversity of ideas. I'm glad that at each of the 19 town halls and constituent coffees I hosted last year, there was never any shortage of voters who wanted to make their voices heard. I think our district would be a worse place if we agreed with each other all the time. My promise is that whether we agree or disagree, I will never stop listening, and I will never stop fighting for our state and its people. This month, I was proud to be ranked as one of the most accessible members of Congress for the town halls that I hosted in 2019. And in 2020, we're going to continue that trend by hosting town halls where I get to hear directly from people in my district about the challenges they are facing and the solutions they want us to see us take action on. As the Congresswoman for Oklahoma's 5th District, it is critical that I hear from the people that I represent so I can bring their voices to Congress. That is the spirit of democracy. That is the spirit of debate and compromise and hopefulness that I believe makes our congressional district special. It was earlier this year that I had the honor of unveiling a bust in the U.S. Capitol of Oklahoma's own former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Carl Albert. The whole Oklahoma delegation in the U.S. House, Republicans and Democrats, joined together for the ceremony. Now, some of you may be familiar with the little giant from Little Dixie. Born in the small town of Bug Tussle, Oklahoma, Carl Albert is the only House Speaker from our state and the highest-ranking federal official from Oklahoma. But what made Speaker Carl Albert special was not the fact that he is remembered as the highest-rising official from Oklahoma. It's what he did with his position as Speaker of the House that matters. Speaker Albert led the House of Representatives during some of the most tumultuous times in U.S. history. He was Speaker during the Watergate scandal and during the Vietnam War. Twice, as the Nixon administration was collapsing, Speaker Albert was just one heartbeat away from the U.S. presidency. But rather than putting himself in line for the Oval Office, Speaker Albert worked to do what was right for the long-term health of our democracy. He searched for bipartisan support in the House's inquiry into Watergate, and he ensured that a vice president of Nixon's own party would be installed in the White House, ending the possibility that he would fill the presidency when Nixon resigned. It was Speaker Albert who said, "I like to face issues in terms of conditions, and not in terms of someone's inborn political philosophy." Today, Carl Albert's speakership is a strong reminder of the positive impact we can have when we put partisanship aside in service to our country. As we begin 2020, I want to thank everyone who has written to my office, attended town halls, and made their voices heard over the past year. I am honored to be your representative in Congress. And as we set out on a new decade, I believe that by working together and looking for common ground, we can make a difference on the issues we care most about. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States.